Well, hello, friends. Welcome back to Commute Talk. It's kind of early, cloudy morning here, and it's pretty nice. So, got a good feeling about today. Hope things are looking okay where you are too. So, today I thought I would talk a little bit about advice and about receiving or getting advice. Because since I started this YouTube channel, I have been giving out a fair amount of advice, both indirectly and directly. And I also hear from people who say that they take inspiration from my work, and that's really lovely to hear. And I'm really glad if I can offer some new perspective on something that people hadn't considered, or if someone sees what I do and it gets them fired up to do what they do. That's super cool. But it has gotten me thinking lately that it's very important when you take advice from someone or somewhere that you always remember where it came from, and that you always consider the context or the perspective of the source of the advice. Because whenever you're hearing something from me, it always comes from my personal perspective, right? From my context, from my background, from my interests, from my opinions and things. And everything that I say isn't going to make sense for everybody who hears it. And probably this is obvious, but I think it's still important to talk about. It goes all over the place too, right? And it applies to everything, because I have people asking me like, hey, why are you using Ubuntu, or why are you using Qt Creator to develop software? And the answer is just that that's what I like, that's what works for me right now. And people also ask like more specific programming things, like how come you're not using the STL? Like, why do you not like it? Blah blah blah. And I can answer these questions, and I try to answer them as best as I can. But just because I like something or something works for me or doesn't work for me, it doesn't mean that that I'm right about it, or that I'm wrong, or that there even is a right or wrong. And I think this right versus wrong is also part of something that happens a lot when there's this thing where young programmers or beginner programmers, when they get their feet wet and they get a little bit familiar with the language that they're learning, and then they sort of go out in the world and they find some people who have been doing it for a lot longer than they have, and they sort of latch onto them and try to absorb knowledge. And this is, of course, like very natural, and we all do that, and I did that, and you did that, or you're about to do that with someone. And it's just a natural part of developing as a programmer. But at least in my case, I was not always very discerning with the information I was taking in. I was just absorbing everything, and I always figured like, oh, I'm sure they're right about everything, because they've been doing this for 20 years or whatever. And obviously there was a lot of good information to be had that way, but I think it is very healthy to keep in mind where the information comes from, and to not take anyone's word as gospel. And I certainly wouldn't want anyone taking my word as gospel, because I'm just a guy, and I just have a specific style of doing things, and I like specific stuff. And I hope everyone can go out and develop their own personal style and find what they like and what works for them. And I certainly don't want to offer anyone any kind of magical, one-size-fits-all mumbo-jumbo. And I don't think anyone's really trying to do that. But I do see something lately where there seems to be this abundance of games programming patterns being shilled left and right. And I don't know where that comes from, but I do see it more and more. And like people, especially young programmers with maybe not a lot of experience yet, and they've learned about how video games are made, or like some patterns they're used in games development, and they run around talking about how this is like the one true way of doing things, and I find that very strange, because obviously there's not only one true way of doing things, but like, who's been filling these kids' heads with this stuff that there's just the one way of doing things? And I'm not here to point fingers or to crap on anybody, but it is something I find quite strange. Now, when we take advice, let me just park the car here. When we take advice from people, then, like I was saying, it's important to consider where it came from, and to remember that everyone who talks to us, they are coming from their own perspective, from their own mindset, from their own background. And when you hear me saying anything, it's because I have some thing that I want to share, but it's probably very colored. I don't really know where I want to go with this. I guess maybe this is just a whole thing. This has just been on my mind, and I just wanted to get it out. I do think that the responsibility here should probably be shared, though. The people who receive advice, I mean, all of us receive advice, right? And we need to be smart and consider where it's coming from. But people who find themselves giving out advice also need to be smart and be considerate. Think about who's listening. Think about to always remember that you might have someone listening who's not developed enough in the field yet to be able to tell that you're coming from your personal perspective rather than telling them the facts. I don't know. But maybe there's just something about games programming. Like, I guess I do this too. Like, I almost find myself a little bit starstruck by games programming, because I always loved video games, and to see the people working on them, it's fascinating, right? You can see how the stuff is made finally after a whole lifetime of thinking these things are so cool. So maybe we're not holding them to the same standard or something. I don't know. It's an interesting subject. Anyways, I guess that's what I wanted to say today. So just remember, everyone out there has their own perspective and coming from their own place. Wow. I'm going to go and buy some lunch. So I'll see you guys later. Thanks for hanging out with me on the commute. Bye.